What if you had everything? Fame, talent, critical acclaim, only to walk away from it all? Not because you failed, but because the world wasn't ready for someone like you? That's the heartbreaking story of Debra Winger. Hollywood is a place where dreams come true until they don't. It lifts unknowns to stardom, but just as quickly it can erase them. And no one knows this better than Debra Winger, a 3-time Oscar nominee, a powerhouse actress, a woman who should have been unstoppable. Yet at the height of her career, she vanished. No scandals, no addictions, no fall from grace, just a woman too bold, too honest, too real for an industry that wanted her to be anything but. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Years before Hollywood turned its back on her, life did. A freak accident left her blind, paralyzed, and clinging to survival. Doctors said she might never walk again, let alone act. But she fought back. She clawed her way to the top. And when she finally got there, Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. This isn't just a story about fame. It's about a woman who refused to be broken by tragedy, by an industry that tried to silence her, even by her own body. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why her disappearance still shocks the world decades later. Stick around, because what really happened to Debra Winger will change how you see Hollywood forever. 17 years old. That's how old Debra Winger was when her life split into before and after. Before, she was just a bright kid from Ohio with big dreams and no idea how to chase them. After, she was a fighter, because fate left her no other choice. It started with a summer job at an amusement park, just a way to make some cash, nothing special. Then, in one brutal second, everything changed. A truck swerved, a costume slipped. She reached out to grab it, and her body was thrown like a rag doll onto the pavement. When she woke up in the hospital, the world was dark. Not metaphorically, literally. A brain hemorrhage had stolen her sight. One side of her body refused to move. Doctors whispered words like permanent damage and recovery unlikely. For months, she lay trapped in a broken body, staring at nothing, wondering if she'd ever walk again, let alone act. But here's the thing about Debra Winger. She doesn't quit. Somewhere in that darkness, she made a promise. To herself, to God, to the universe. If I get through this, I'm going after what I want. No more playing it safe. And then, miracle after miracle, her vision returned. Her body healed. The girl who'd been told she might never move again walked out of that hospital. But she wasn't the same person who'd gone in. The accident didn't just leave scars. It lit a fire. She dropped out of college, ditched the sensible life her family wanted, and with nothing but sheer stubbornness, she marched into Hollywood, not as a starry-eyed hopeful, but as a survivor. Because after you face death, audition rejections don't scare you. But Hollywood? It wasn't ready for her. Debra Winger arrived in Hollywood like a storm. Fierce, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. But storms aren't welcomed with open arms. They're feared, contained, and that's exactly what Tinseltown tried to do to her. Her first roles? Small, forgettable, the kind where you blink and miss her, a bit part in Wonder Woman as Diana's sister, a cringeworthy stint in the softcore Slumber Party 57, a film she'd later refused to even acknowledge. This wasn't the dream she'd fought for. This was survival. But here's what casting directors didn't understand. Winger didn't just want to act, she needed to. After nearly dying, after defying every doctor's prediction, what was another rejection? Another no? She wore them like armor. The problem? Hollywood in the 70s wanted leading ladies to be two things: beautiful and agreeable. Winger was undeniably the first. The second? Not a chance. She was too intense, too raw. Her performances didn't just show emotion, they were emotion. Directors didn't know what to do with that kind of fire, so she waited. She endured. And then, when Hollywood least expected it, she exploded onto the scene in Urban Cowboy. Not as the first choice, not even as the fifth, but as the only choice. Because when Debra Winger walked into that audition, she didn't read lines. She lived them. The director took one look at her and told the studio, "It's her or I walk." Suddenly, Hollywood had to reckon with the very thing it had tried to ignore: a woman who refused to be small. The moment Debra Winger became a star, she made one thing perfectly clear: She wasn't here to play by Hollywood's rules. While other actresses smiled politely and nodded, Winger asked why. And that single word made her the most dangerous woman in Hollywood. Her explosive performance in An Officer and a Gentleman should have been a triumph. The chemistry between her and Richard Gere was electric, except it wasn't chemistry at all. It was pure, unfiltered animosity. Acting with Gere was like acting opposite a brick wall, she famously said. Their hatred was so palpable it bled through the screen, creating one of cinema's most intense romantic pairings. The Academy took notice, her first Oscar nomination, but Hollywood whispered behind her back, difficult, unprofessional, a problem. Then came terms of endearment, and with it, the most legendary feud of her career. Shirley MacLaine, Hollywood royalty, expected deference. Winger gave her war. They clashed over everything. Line readings, blocking, even lunch breaks. The tension became so toxic that Winger reportedly farted in MacLaine's face as a power move. When MacLaine won the Oscar and sneered, "I deserve this," everyone knew exactly who that dig was meant for. But here's what they missed. These weren't tantrums. They were battles for creative control in an industry that gave women none. When producers wanted her to play dumb, she demanded depth. When directors treated her like a prop, she fought back. Every clash, every outburst was a grenade thrown at Hollywood's sexist machinery, and Hollywood, threatened by a woman it couldn't control, began quietly shutting doors. The scripts stopped coming, the phones stopped ringing, not because she'd lost her talent, but because she'd refused to lose herself. The year was 1995. Debra Winger stood at the peak of her career. 3 Oscar nominations, critical acclaim, and a reputation as one of the most talented actresses of her generation. And then, without warning, she vanished. No press conference, no dramatic farewell, just silence. To Hollywood, it made no sense. This was an industry where people clawed their way to the top and clung on for dear life. But Winger had never played by Hollywood's rules. Why start now? The truth was, she hadn't been pushed out. She had simply outgrown the game. The roles had started drying up, not because she couldn't act, but because Hollywood had no idea what to do with a woman like her. She was too complex for the one-dimensional love interests, too fierce for the shrinking violet roles. Studios wanted ingenues, not warriors. And Winger, she refused to shrink herself to fit their mold. But her exit wasn't just about rejecting bad scripts. It was about reclaiming her life. Behind the scenes, she'd found something rare in Hollywood: real love. Arliss Howard, her second husband, offered her something the industry never could: peace. They moved to a quiet farm in upstate New York, far from the flashing bulbs and backstabbing dealmakers. She traded red carpets for rolling hills, pressed junkets for mornings with her children. For the first time in decades, she wasn't Debra Winger, movie star. She was just Debra. The industry whispered that she'd been blacklisted, that she was difficult, that she'd thrown it all away. But Winger knew the truth. She hadn't lost Hollywood. Hollywood had lost her. The Hollywood machine never expected to see Debra Winger again. By the early 2000s, she had become a cautionary tale whispered about in studio offices, the brilliant actress who chose to disappear rather than play by the rules. But in 2012, something remarkable happened. After nearly 2 decades away, Winger quietly stepped back into the spotlight and proved she was more relevant than ever. Her return wasn't marked by splashy magazine covers or desperate attempts to recapture youth. Instead, she emerged on her own terms, silver-haired, unapologetically middle-aged, radiating a hard-won wisdom that no 30-year-old ingenue could fake. When she appeared in the Netflix series The Ranch as Maggie Bennett, audiences saw something revolutionary: an older, female character written with depth, humor, and complexity. It was the kind of role Hollywood claimed didn't exist for women of a certain age. Yet here Winger was, proving them wrong with every scene. What made this comeback extraordinary wasn't just that she returned, it was how she did it. While former co-stars scrambled for Botox and age-defying surgeries, Winger embraced her natural aging process with a quiet dignity that felt radical. She chose projects that interested her rather than those that might return her to the A-list. Indie films like The Lovers, 2017, showcased her unparalleled ability to convey lifetimes of emotion in a single glance. Voice work in Ultra City Smiths demonstrated her continued creative risk-taking. Each role served as a masterclass in acting. and a rebuke to an industry that had tried to discard her. Perhaps most surprising was her emergence as an elder stateswoman of Hollywood feminism. Young actresses now cited her as an inspiration for bucking the system, the very qualities that had made her difficult in the 1980s. Her refusal to suffer fools, her insistence on authenticity, were now celebrated as groundbreaking. In interviews, she spoke with hard-earned clarity about the industry's sexism and ageism, not with bitterness, but with the perspective of someone who had walked away and thrived. This wasn't a comeback born from necessity or nostalgia. It was the triumphant second act of an artist who had finally found the perfect balance between her craft and her peace. Winger's return proved something profound. True talent never expires. It simply waits for the world to catch up. Debra Winger's story doesn't end with a standing ovation or a Lifetime Achievement Award. It's something far more powerful, a life lived entirely on her own terms. Today, as she moves through her late 60s, she stands as a living rebuke to everything toxic about fame, a reminder that some souls are simply too big for any system to contain. Look at her now, no longer the fiery young rebel, but something rarer, a woman completely at peace with her choices. She acts when she wants to in projects that excite her. She splits her time between a quiet farm and selective creative work, far from the Hollywood grind. That signature intensity still burns in her eyes, but it's softened by wisdom. When young actresses seek her advice, she doesn't lecture about craft. She tells them to protect their humanity. The industry that once sidelined her has been forced to reckon with her legacy. Every time an actress demands equal pay, rejects a stereotypical role, or calls out the double standards of aging in Hollywood, she's walking the path Winger blazed. The documentary, Searching for Debra Winger, wasn't just about one woman's disappearance. It became a rallying cry about how the entertainment business discards women. And Winger, she never even participated in it. She didn't need to. Her life was the statement. In her most recent appearances, there's no trace of bitterness, just quiet amusement at how things turned out. The roles are smaller now, but richer. The spotlight is fainter, but kinder. She's been married to Arliss Howard for nearly 3 decades, an eternity in Hollywood years. When asked if she has regrets, she laughs. The girl who survived a near-fatal accident, who fought her way to the top only to walk away, who refused every label Hollywood tried to stick on her. Regrets? Here's the truth they never understood about Debra Winger. She didn't leave because she lost. She left because she won. So what do you think? Was Debra Winger Hollywood's greatest rebel, or just a woman brave enough to want more? Hit like if you believe true success isn't about fame, but freedom. Subscribe for more stories of icons who changed the game. And in the comments, tell us, which modern actress carries Winger's fearless spirit today? This isn't goodbye. For legends like Debra Winger, the story never really ends.